Good afternoon and welcome to CFO Lunchtime Live. I am James Solomons, Global CFO at XREF. Thank you for joining us over lunch today as we shine the spotlight on employee well-being and focus on how this important factor is critical to a CFO's bottom line. Now, Deloitte recently revealed that 70% of CFOs now view workplace well-being as a strategic priority, with the cost of absenteeism to the local economy exceeding 32.5 billion per annum in payroll and lost productivity. CFOs, though, now have the power to change this by an employee benefit called earned wage access, allowing staff access to their earned pay as and whenever they need it, as opposed to waiting for a predetermined payday at some point in the future, providing vital support to your most valuable asset, your staff, which is quite often the largest cost to most businesses these days. Now, to talk about all of this and much more, today we are delighted to be joined by Howard Herman, CFO at McGrath Limited, and Stephen Furman, founder and CEO of Paytime, a leading Australian HR fintech, to understand what earned wage access is and the unique benefits it brings, not only to the employee, but also to the wider organisation. Welcome, panel. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, James. Thanks for having us.
Hi, James. Thank you for having us too.
Thanks, guys. Now, as this is a live discussion, as it always is, if anyone from the audience has a burning question or two, please type them into the chat box and we'll attempt to answer them as we go along. Otherwise, we will have time at the end for Q&A. But it's enough from me. We've got plenty to get through today, so let's get into the questions. So, Howard, thanks again for joining us. And before we get into the discussions on hand, let's set the scene a bit. Can you share with us a little about your CFO journey and what led you to McGrath?
Okay, thanks, James. I'll try and keep this brief, but from my accent, it's probably a giveaway that I come from South Africa. My first role was with the property arm of a leading mining house, Anglo American. And about 20 years ago, we decided to emigrate to Australia, and I continued in the property industry with a small private property developer. Also gained some good experience at Lend-Lease in their project management and development arm. And then an opportunity came up to almost switch industries to retail, and I spent my last 15 or 18 years in retail, quite a change from property. In the listed space, firstly with a ladies apparel business listed on a stock exchange in Australia, and then also worked listing a business on the NASDAQ, which was quite an interesting experience. It's a lingerie business, so that kept me busy for a good couple of years. But then 3 years ago, McGrath were looking for a CFO, and it's quite a nice time to get back into the property industry because the cycle was at a bit of a low point. So here I am at McGrath, back in the property where I started. That's pretty much a very high-level summary.
Yeah, fantastic. So definitely an in and out of the property side of the industry, of the CFO world. In terms of that, obviously, people are a big part of all of those businesses. So, at a high level, I mean, how important now is the people side of the business to a CFO's bottom line?
Well, as you mentioned in the start, it's pretty fundamental. I mean, I'll talk more a little bit about it later, but, without the people, what do you have, right? So we'll talk about some of the aspects of this particular product and what we're doing later in the webinar.
Yeah, fantastic. Stephen, over to you. It's great to have you on today's discussion. Can you share with us a little background on yourself and what led you to become the founder and CEO of Paytime?
Yeah, thanks, James. So I've actually taken probably the opposite journey of what most do. I've come from the private equity world and now gone into startup, which is normally the other way around. But essentially, my focus has always been on growth businesses and researching and understanding what are the next trends, what are people looking for, how do we kind of get on that next curve. And one of the key things that stood out to me about 18 months ago was reading a number of articles and looking at the market of how financially stressed many Australians are. And, there's a big portion, well over 50% of Australians are now living paycheck to paycheck. And it's not only your low income earners, even your high income earners, a big portion of those people are living paycheck to paycheck. So I really sat down and looked at this and said, well, what is the cause of this and how do we resolve the financial stress? Because having discussions with the likes of Beyond Blue and Lifeline and a few other organizations, it became evident that financial stress is actually the leading cause of mental health problems. So if we can't solve the financial stress aspect, mental health is never going to be resolved. And that's really where Paytime was born, because at the end of the day, we all have expenses every day. But more importantly, we have these unexpected ones that pop up out of the blue that we can't control. And there's been a lot of advances in technology, especially around automating finances, ERP, CRMs, things like that. But one of the key things that hasn't changed in many, many years is payroll. Payroll can only be done in batch payments. And that's why, pretty much all of us either get paid fortnightly or monthly. And there is a number of retailers and a couple of other blue collar employers that do pay weekly, but it's generally weekly, fortnightly, or monthly. Now, it doesn't matter where the pay cycle is. If somebody has an unexpected expense, the only choice right now, or prior to a solution like earned wage access, is payday loans, buy now, pay laters, or credit cards, and all of those are in some way or form or shape putting people back into debt. So it was really about just working out how do we allow people to access what they've already earned. It's their money, they've worked for it, they've already earned it. And that's really, was the start of how Paytime was created.
Yeah, fascinating. It's as you say, it's I don't profess to being a high net wealth earner, but obviously accountants, we're meant to be good with money, but sometimes you stretch yourself. Car loans, home loans, renovations. Just if anybody hears any banging coming from my home office today, there is people on my roof, so I do apologise. I'll mute when I can, but sometimes it does. It gets a bit tight, and my daughter's got to have shortly a small growth removed on her face, and I've got something to get removed from my thumb, a little growth as well. Private hospital bills, we're looking at probably close to $4,000 between us. And I don't have $4,000 lying around from paycheck to paycheck. So you're right, it happens everywhere, and certainly I would absolutely agree on the mental health side. Having come from public practice and also from a financial planning background, certainly the conversations I used to have with clients back in the day was always focused around money. And certainly as accountants, and Howard, you may even attest to this, even though you've been in the corporate world most of your career, if not all of your career, people will often feel comfortable talking to a finance person about their finance lives because we understand it and they open up. And it often then leads to a few more discussions, sometimes about marriage counselling and other things going in life. Because if someone's exposed their financial world to you, they certainly feel comfortable talking about other things. But I think we've got some questions a bit later on about this. But certainly, I wouldn't disagree. I mean, in terms of the CFO's role in this, I mean, they have been transforming and automating finance functions for some time. Why do you think now payroll has become front and center, Stephen, as something else they need to be looking at?
Yeah, so I think the key thing here is that the one thing that companies are not focused on is financial well-being for their staff. Mental health's been the forefront for many years now, which is fantastic, and it's how I say it. It's financial stress is where mental health was 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago, where people just don't want to talk about it. And unfortunately, when we do approach companies and we say to them, we've had X number of your staff reaching out to us, because we do get, we're getting now anywhere between 80 and 200 plus inquiries a week from employees saying, how do we access Paytime? We'd like to get it. And we say, it's a B2B solution. We'll reach out to your employer, but can you also? And in Australia today, the standard answer from HR and CFOs is, well, we've got a lot of solutions to assist our staff. If they need money, they should just come to us and we'll give them a pay advance. The problem with that is, when you get to the C-suite level, you don't really live, like you did in your first or your second job. If the car breaks down, you've got the medical expense, the tires needs to be changed. you're not going to go to your HR person or payroll and say, can I have a $300 or $400 pay advance? You know, it's embarrassing. You'd rather just go get a payday loan. It doesn't matter how much it costs. I'll just get it because I need to get it solved. So, you know, money is a sensitive topic, and people shouldn't have to ask for what's already theirs. They've earned it. It's their money. Now, you know, we also got to get around the mindset that, oh, well, if we give people access to their money, they're going to go to the pokies or pubs and clubs and just spend all of it and have nothing left. Now, the irony of it is one, we shouldn't feel like we're the big daddy as the employer, you know, and telling people how to spend their money. They are adults at the end of the day. But more importantly, if they do have those kind of vices already in their lives, they're probably using credit cards and payday loans now in any case. So this is not making the situation worse for them because we're not putting them into more debt. Often what this reveals is it actually reveals that they do have a problem and they now need to solve it, as opposed to the other way around. So it's really about just allowing people, if and when they want access to their money, they can get it. If they don't want access to it, they get paid as normal.
Yeah, interesting. And I'll have a question in a minute on the mechanics. But I mean, you mentioned some stats, Stephen, in your previous response. You know, what are some of those stats we're looking at when it comes to financial stress? I think
it's actually
many are
quite
living
amazing.
paycheck to paycheck.
And it's actually getting quite amazing, because when we first looked at this, it always was around, you know, these third world countries, Southeast Asia or Africa, you know, have got no money. But research that's coming out now is well over 50% of Australians are living paycheck to paycheck. And there's something like 25% of people earning over $180,000 a year that are living paycheck to paycheck. Now, our solution can't solve a problem where somebody is earning, let's say, $5,000 a month or 10,000, whatever that number is, but they're spending 2 or 3 or 5,000 more than what they earn. You know, nothing can solve that. But if you're earning 5 and you're spending 5, and you know, you have, as you said, you know, let's say last week you have a medical expense for $500-600 that you have to now pay out, or $1,000, and this week you've got rent to pay, you're going to be short on that rent because it's just an unexpected expense. So, you know, with that in mind, there's over 70% of Australians that don't even have $5,000 in savings for these unexpected expenses. So, you know, it's really just about trying to match income to expenses and smooth it out for people, and just get their lives, you know, into a position where they're not stressing when they're going to work every day.
Yeah, well, income and expense matching principles is the fundamental part of accounting, isn't it?
Fundamentals for CFOs.
That's it. There's well over 150 who would certainly be online today. That would certainly be across that. So let's talk about mechanics, Stephen. We're in this on-demand world. So how does Paytime and the concept of earned wage access actually work?
Yeah, and it's pretty simple, is in that, so we've built technology that plugs seamlessly into payroll, and if you've got time and attendance software, we plug into both if you have both. And essentially what happens is, in real time, our technology allows individuals to be able to see how much they're accruing every day. And based on that, they can then access, we normally say around 50%, but we can go higher. And you know, as an example, with McGrath, our access is significantly higher than that. So we sit with the company and we determine what is the right level. And it's anywhere usually between 50 and 85%-ish. We can go a bit higher, but we do want to make sure that an individual does come home with something on payday, that they're not coming home with nothing. That is the key. And because we're plugging into payroll and we're accessing it in real time, it's not a loan, there's no credit checks, and in fact, there's nothing to pay back at all, because essentially all they're doing is accessing what they've already earned. And that's really what differentiates us from these other companies that are out there marketing themselves as on-demand pay. We are not on-demand pay. We are earned wage access. It's a very different concept. On-demand pay is a loan. You get a direct debit order that goes off supposedly on payday. The problem is, if you're a shift worker and you've worked X hours last month and your debit order is going off next month for the same, you know, assumption that you're going to earn the same as last month because you've now got a loan, you know, that's where the debit order bounces. So we got nothing to repay back. All that happens is if you access, let's say, $1,000 of your $5,000 during the month, you will come home on payday with $4,000 because you've already accessed the $1,000. There's nothing to repay.
Yep.
The other big thing also is our solution is 100% free for the company. So we don't charge anything to implement it. We don't charge any ongoing fees whatsoever. An employee will just pay a fixed notional amount of money. Think of it as like an ATM fee, if and when they access their money. So if they don't access it, it costs them nothing. They can open it up every day. They can open it up 6 times a day if they want. There's no charge. They can see how much they're earning. It's only if and when they access it that get charged a fixed dollar amount, on what they're actually accessing. And as soon as they access it, that money gets transferred into their bank account in real time. So it's in their account in seconds for them to use and access straight away. And that's really, how it works in terms of really simple. And the other big thing is the rollout and how it can, probably talk a bit more in terms of confirming this is we do all the heavy lifting. We often get pushed back and say, oh, look, we don't have time. It's another solution we've got to implement. We've got a whole lot of projects that we're having to do. This is not like a payroll software. It's not like an ERP solution. When we do all the integrations, we switch it on, and it's available for everybody, and off you go kind of thing. So, we do 99% of all the work. So that 1% is obviously the setups that we have a meeting with payroll person with. And then we ask the company to send out communications that we even create for the company to notify all their staff that it's available. And other than that, there's nothing else to be done. It really is a seamless solution.
Okay, fascinating. Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure Howard can either confirm or deny how easy it was. So, I think we'll have some more questions on a bit of those mechanics in a minute. But Howard, over to you now. As Stephen said, yourself and McGrath have been early adopters in Australia, offering Paytime to your team members. Can you share with us what made you consider this option for your staff, and what was the sentiment within the wider leadership team around bringing something like this innovative solution in?
Yeah, thanks, James. Well, as we said at the start, employee well-being is such a critical, cog of every business these days, and particularly financial well-being as well. And if you just take a look at our business, we're a services business, and two of the main drivers or main, assets, so to speak, of our business is one, the brand, the McGrath brand, which is, very well known in the real estate circles, but then the other is our people. And the well-being of our people is critical to the success of the business. And when I spoke to Stephen initially about this Paytime product, for me it was a no-brainer. To provide a product that will give staff financial flexibility, and as Stephen said, it's a very light touch from our end. Paytime did all the heavy lifting. So when we initially discussed this at the so-called ELT or leadership level, everyone agreed that if it's going to cost us nothing, it's going to benefit our people, and it's going to make their lives less stressful, have more financial flexibility. It was almost like a no-brainer for us, even though we had to go through just the formal approval process. There was unanimous support for the product around the exec table.
Yeah. Well, that, as you say, you took the words out of my mouth. It doesn't cost the business anything, and of course, it improves. I like the term, that flexibility for staff. We have had a question from the audience, and Stephen, you were probably expecting this. What is the fee that employees will pay to access the thing? And look, it's a very open and honest question.
Yeah, so I'll give a range if that's okay, because there's obviously, we do have one or two couple of competitors out there who's potentially wanting to that question. So it really ranges on a number of factors, and it's anywhere from $2.49 to $3.49 per withdrawal, and that's a fixed fee. So it's less than a cup of coffee, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. The buy now pay later, they're $5 a month. They're $5 a month. Same sort of thing.
Exactly. And if you think about it, there's over 60% of Australians now that got overdrawn in their bank accounts at least once in the month. Now, often that's not necessarily because they don't have money, but they haven't transferred it, or there's a debit order going off their phone account tomorrow that they didn't transfer money. And if we go overdrawn on your bank account, our banks charge us anywhere between $10 and $25, depending on the bank. Now, for anywhere between $2.50 and $3.50, it's almost a no-brainer in making sure that your money is there.
Yeah, look, and I think the other thing too there is that the whole reason for an innovative product like this is to provide, as Howard said, that flexibility. It's a bit like delivery fees. You save 30% on a great deal online, and then there's a $5 shipping fee. Like, nah, I'm not doing it. People have this mentality. So if it was in the range of $10 to $20, people probably wouldn't take it up. They would probably then go back to their employer and go, "You're actually charging me almost half of my hourly rate to get it, so I'm not going to take it up." So thank you for being honest there. I think
and sorry, and James, also just to be clear for our listeners there too is, of course, we do also have companies and clients where they co-contribute. So we've got the fixed fee, and we will have a couple of our clients who say, okay, well, we'll contribute $1 per employee per month, and we'll reduce that advance rate or the access fee for our staff. We do have a couple of companies that have said, actually, we'll cover it. We'll pay a fixed SaaS fee. So in that instance, I pay, and again, a few dollars a month per employee, and we give them anywhere between 1 and 3 free withdrawals in the month for the staff. So we have the flexibility, but we do recognize, if companies don't want to pay anything, that's fine. We know that if we put it into companies, it does get used.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. That's as I said, thanks for clarifying that for our audience. I knew that question was going to come, and we've removed that elephant out of the room nice and early. So back to you, Howard. You mentioned it was pretty seamless, but I mean, specifically, how long did it take? How easy was it to integrate Paytime into your payroll or ERP? Anything specific, that took a bit longer than you expected, or was it all really, really easy to get in place?
It was pretty seamless, James. As Steve said, I mean, they did all the heavy lifting. There was an integration piece between Paytime and our payroll software. But once that was done, it's a pretty light touch. I think the people in the payroll department probably spend a couple of minutes a week just running a few reports, but it's pretty light touch and absolutely seamless from our point of view. I mean, that was one of the things that we really looked at, is that if it was going to cost not only time, but money, but also a lot of time for our people to integrate this, we'd say, well, guys, is it really worth it? But that was also one of the selling features, that it really wasn't a big issue at all. And once it was fully integrated, it's almost like completely seamless as part of our normal processes and systems. So that was another selling point for us.
Yeah, that's right. Because obviously, you're in professional services. In your world, time is money. So certainly, that would make sense as well. So you're now circa 6 months into using Paytime. What has been the response from the team, and do you see this as a competitive advantage for Magrari in this talent fight that we have at the moment?
Well, to answer the first question, we're actually quite surprised that the uptake has actually been pretty good. There's quite a large percentage that use the product, and different people use it at different times of the month. The feedback has been really good. The communication, which is drafted by Paytime, goes out now and again just to remind people of the product, and it's just a benefit that we didn't offer before. So there's no downside to it. And whether can I say it's an attraction tool? It's certainly not a detraction tool, but it's just one of the things that we're doing overall as the employee benefits. It's just something else that we can offer in our toolkit, so to speak, to say, guys, we've got an early wage product. Whether our competitors have got it or thinking of doing it, I can't comment, but at least we've done it, and it's something that we can talk about, in that whole interview process.
Yeah, fantastic. So, obviously, as you said, it's another benefit, and you operate a business where people are everything, and that well-being is high on the agenda, as is businesses in non-professional services industries. Are there other features within the app that can assist your staff outside of being able to have access to their earned wage?
Yes, so I don't know if you've seen the app, James, but there's obviously a well-being component as well, which deals with a whole lot of range of things in terms of mental well-being. You know, there's a few financial tools, budgeting tools. We can't really comment as to how that is being used because we don't have access to that back end. Maybe Stephen can comment on that. But in addition to the early wage part, you know, just the general well-being. And there's a whole lot of links and, you know, to sort of like certain organizations, etc., which if people need it at the so-called tip of their fingertip, it's right there and it's all on one app. So we see it clearly as an early wage product, but also as a well-being tool that people can navigate certain websites or certain features, which was never, I guess, probably was on the internet in different places, but now can be sort of like at their fingertips in one app. So that was also an attraction for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think these days people live on their phones and their life revolves around there. So to have it in one place is good. So Stephen, do you want to add anything extra on the other features that are within the app?
So again, I mean the key thing, obviously, I mean the key thing with our solution was, as I mentioned earlier, just giving access to individuals' pay doesn't solve the problem. We've got to get them into a position of well-being and then hopefully move them into a savings position. So we really do provide a complete financial and mental well-being solution within the Paytime app. And what does that mean? Well, essentially what we've done is we've plugged into the likes of Beyond Blue, Lifeline, Men's Line, Suicide Prevention, a whole bunch of these organizations on the mental health side. And then we've also plugged into what I call the healthy part. That was interesting because the healthy part I'd never thought of initially. But when we were talking to a few CFOs in the early days, they said, well, a lot of my staff are very healthy, but why don't you offer, kind of healthy aspects? So we've now offer healthy eating, dieting, exercise regimes, a whole bunch of those things for people so they can kind of make sure that their lives, are on the healthy side. And then the other thing is we have 5 phone lines to organizations because what we've identified, and again, feedback from these mental health organizations, is that unfortunately when somebody does need help, they don't think of the 1300 number. The last thing that comes to mind. So within our app, we've got 5 phone lines, Beyond Blue, Lifeline, Suicide Prevention, a few others, where they literally just push a button and within seconds they're talking to the financial counselor or the mental health counselor on the other end of the phone for these organizations. Now, all of that is 100% free and we're never going to charge for that. That's nothing that we, The other thing is we provide free financial counseling to individuals. Through an organisation called Financial Counselling Australia and another organisation which provides accredited financial counsellors, and individuals can either talk to them through our app with messaging or on the phone, and it's 100% confidential and really to help those individuals that are in a bad position in terms of their debt. How do they get out of it? And then the last one is financial tools, budgeting and savings programs that we try help people actually budget better so that at the end of the month there is actually money left over for them, because unfortunately we all want to save money, but if our money is all going into one bank account every month, you turn around, there's nothing left. So it's really about getting people into that position of happiness is what I would call it.
Yeah, I mean, Howard mentioned it before. He didn't know the uptake of the other products, and I guess I think that's quite important because staff within a business wouldn't want their employer knowing they've contacted the financial counselor, and that's very private. So I think that's quite an important aspect that there was sort of not brushed over, but we talked about in convo. But I just wanted to pull that out as something quite important.
Yeah, exactly, and that is actually why we also put it in. Is we were told that a lot of employees don't actually access a lot of the EAP solutions within the companies if it's on desktops and laptops, because they're worried about what's the manager going to think or what's the CEO going to think. Am I do I have a mental issue or problem, even though it's spoken about openly. So this now allows them to access all of these things, 100% privacy. We don't track it at all. We don't want to track it. So if somebody wants to access it, good luck. We just want to help those individuals.
Yeah, you're just providing the enabling the conversation to have, but aside from that, you don't know what's going on. Okay, so I mean, you mentioned there right at the start, and you're 50%, can even go up to higher. Is there a limit on how much somebody can access?
So we normally don't like to go higher than 85%, and the reason we don't like to go higher than 85% is essentially,
at the end.
Yeah, one, there's something at the end, but also if they are contract workers or they shift workers, there's always, prior to payday, some adjustments that need to get made. So we always allow something to make sure that there's never a risk of anybody drawing more than what they've earned and going into negative, and essentially ensuring that if there's, they've taken 1 or 2 days of unpaid leave, or there's a shift that hasn't been approved, or whatever it could be. So that's why we normally say around 50 to 65. We would go higher than that on full-time workers or full-time employees, where we know there's no variance month to month in terms of what they earn. Then it's pretty simple for us in terms of that. But we take into account all of that within our calculations of our app.
Yeah, okay. So in terms of accessibility, and maybe this is a company by company basis, is it eligible for all workers? Is it to higher earning staff, which we've already discussed about, they get into trouble as well? Do higher earning staff have the same access as frontline broad-based workers?
Yeah, so interesting research that actually came out, not out of Australia as yet because it's too new, but out of the UK and US from, I think it was Ernst & Young, if I'm not mistaken, where usage across pay packets is pretty much even. Doesn't matter what low income earners or high income earners, and that's not anywhere between 30 and 50% of employees are using it between 2 and 4 times in the month, and we're seeing it around 2 to 3 times a month. But it's being used for different reasons. So your lower income earners are using it, if the car breaks down, or there's a medical expense, or rent's due today and they're only getting paid in 2 days' time and they were a bit short, those kind of things. At the C-suite or high income side of things, besides those things that could be used for, we are actually seeing C-suites that are still getting paid once a month as opposed to fortnightly or weekly, putting it into their mortgage offset accounts or buying shares. Now, if we put our salary into our mortgage offset account once a week as opposed to once a month, depending on your mortgage, depending on interest rates, etc., but you could potentially save over 3 years on a 30-year mortgage by having money, sitting there for X number of more days than it is just once a month. So people that understand money and can know how to use that arbitrage are making a return on their money as a result. Others are using it to cover expenses. And to answer your question, it's available for everybody in the company. The only time it's not available is if it's a contractor that invoices a company using an ABN. Other than that, it can be part-timers, could be contractors, but on the payroll, and obviously full-timers.
Yeah. Never actually thought about, the 2 till 50 or 350, whatever that fee is. If you do have a large mortgage and you drop your stuff in weekly, you actually could save much more than that in there. So there you go. Smart people making use of an available thing in their business. So you talked about the differences certainly to the loans earlier.
Yes.
You can probably maybe sort of wrap that up into this answer and be quite specific about it. But what are some of the other common misconceptions around pay on demand from organizations?
So I think the one misconception is again, we've heard about this before, we know about it, why do we need to offer this to our staff as opposed to the others out there? So the thing is ours is a B2B2C solution. And it's B2B because we have to plug into payroll. That's, we can't offer it any other way, or into time and attendance. The other solutions are B2C, so you don't need the employer at all in it. You just log into their app, and essentially you're asking for a loan. And what they're doing is they're looking at your back end through your bank account to understand how much you've earned last month to give you a loan for what you're asking for. And as long as you've earned a minimum amount of money in the previous month, they will give you a loan, and they then direct debit you on your next payday. Now that's all fine. The problem with that is one, they're charging 5% of the loan amount, and if you don't earn enough on your next paycheck because you are a shift worker at one of the supermarkets as an example, you will then go overdrawn in your bank account. You then have issues around repaying it. So with ours, as I said, it's a fixed fee. It's not a loan whatsoever. We don't have, there's no such thing as loan products within our solution, and you're simply accessing what you've already earned. So essentially, if it's 50% on day 2, you can earn 50%. You can withdraw 50% of day 1s. On day 3, you can draw your 50% of day 1 and 2, etc. And that's all that there is. And what essentially happens is there's no effect whatsoever either on the cash flow of the company. So we actually provide the intra-month withdrawals to staff. So for the company, there's no effect on their cash flow either. And all that happens is when the company runs payroll, whether that's weekly, fortnightly, or monthly, we become like another payee in the payroll system. And let's assume $20,000 has been drawn within the month. We get reimbursed the $20,000 when payroll is run, and everybody gets the $20,000 less pro rata. And it's as simple as that.
Yeah, okay. Very, very straightforward. I mean, Howard mentioned earlier, payroll, a few minutes a month. I mean, is it that much work for payroll? Is it really that simple?
Yeah, it's pretty much that simple. We're not trying to hide anything here. And as I said before, James, if this was going to be, certainly from a time point of view, an extra bit of work that the guys have to do over and above their normal day jobs, then we'd have to take a harder look. But the very fact that it's really a light touch from the payroll perspective, and again, it doesn't cost the company any money or any additional costs, then it's almost like, well, this is a benefit that there's only a positive to it. What are the negatives?
Yeah. Stephen, anything you want to add on the level of work?
No, I agree 100%. And the couple of minutes a month is essentially more. Some companies don't even do a couple of minutes a month. If it's the couple of minutes that Howard's payroll would be doing would probably be cross-checking and making sure that there is consolidation and balancing of the numbers, because it's all done automatically in the system. And that's it's as simple as that. It's no more than 2 to 3 minutes a month.
Yeah, which I think those online that might be involved heavily in payroll will be going, that sounds good, because payroll is busy enough as it is. And certainly, whether you're running a weekly, fortnightly, or monthly payroll, the last thing you want to do is have something come in that adds that or potentially delays things. So, that is obviously good. So, Howard, we've talked a lot about the earned wage access and specifically how Paytime works. I just want to go a little bit higher level here, and there has been a lot of talk recently around the Great Resignation and employees looking for greater flexibility and work-life balance. And every single conversation I've been having lately, and different, even on here on CFO Lunchtime Live, employees, the Great Resignation, the last 3 dinners I've been to since getting out and about following COVID, becoming part of everyday life, we just always default to employees. Are these sensational headlines that are currently out there, or really is this a changing of the way that CFOs and heads of people and culture should be approaching the way they work with their employees and the things that they're offering? I mean, what do you see, from your role at McGrath on that now?
Yeah, look, I can certainly say that I think the Great Resignation it is real. I was just reading an article in the AFR not so long ago that people think the best way to get a salary increase is to move jobs, as opposed to going to your existing employer. So look, I'm no expert in it, and certainly our people and culture team are very aware of it. But just taking it up a level, employee well-being is literally everything these days, and your workplace practices, whether it's your flexible work policy or your reward system, or just the whole way in which you interact with your people is front and center of what we do. And employees have just got so much choice now. It's real, and companies have to be on top of their game in that respect to make sure that they retain and attract the best talent. Certainly, it's easier said than done, but there's the whole that's the whole space that people specialize in nowadays. And we at McGrath are trying to do our best. I can't say we're perfect, but we are aware that it's the biggest challenge in any business is the people. And the Paytime tool is just a relevant tool and just one of the things in our toolkit that we're doing in terms of the overall employee well-being. It's novel, it's relevant, and the financial side of it is it's a benefit to the employees. But if it helps retaining people, if it helps attracting people, that's just one of the many things we're doing in the overall employee well-being space.
Yeah, I think it's and feel free either of you to jump in. It's Paytime specifically as a tool. It needs to be. I mean, employee wellbeing should always be business as usual. But something like if this was the only thing you did for employees, it's probably not going to change the game because some people might need it and some people don't. And of course, it's got access to other apps, but it's about having it as part of a suite of tools, like you said, Howard, of the things that you offer. And I think even at XREF, we've been trying to, Stephen, you're probably more akin to this in trying to find developers, and we put out offers and then they come back and go, I went back to my current employer and they offered me another 10 grand on top of the extra 20 grand I was going to get from you, and they're happy. I sort of look at that and I go, well, if I was an employee, if I had to go and get a job interview at another tech company to get a pay rise, there's something wrong there. I was only valued when I was threatening to leave. So you hear lots of those stories, but certainly from where I sit, there's all of these little things. They all add up, because Paytime and it's flexible work, and it's would you say, Stephen, that's a fair, from your perspective now looking into businesses? You've always probably been looking in from the PE world and now in startup world, looking into businesses. Is that a fair way to think about how CFOs and certainly heads of P&C should be looking at that well-being space?
Yeah, I definitely think so. And then there's a lot of tools out there, which is obviously, as I said, is fantastic. There's a lot of things out there, but again, for us, the key is financial well-being has probably been the last thing that people are thinking about. It's really all about work from home, free lunches, coffees, lunch in the office before it wasn't work from home, all of those kind of things all add up to it. But it's really about what's happening when that individual actually goes home, as opposed to just only in the office. How are they coping at home? And we did an independent study. We finished it in January. It took us a few months. Independent research around was well over 1,000 employees, and just asking them independently, would you like to access your pay, when you needed it? And we have a couple of questions. I'm not going to go through all of them, but 83% of those that we actually asked, we didn't disclose our name, anything like that. It was done by an independent third party. 83% of Australians have actually said that they do want to know they can access their money whenever they want it. There was something like over 73% of Australians are saying that they would consider leaving their current job for another job, the exact same pay, provided they could access their money if and when they needed it. And then another one that stood out to me, which is again comes back down to, well, if we give people access to the money, they're just going to squander it on a whole bunch of things. 81% of people of the exact opposite have said that they would feel more in control of their money, and that's simply because, as we say, not everybody knows how to budget. It's kind of just taken for granted. Whereas if there's an expense or there's a debit order going off, people like to match ability to pay that expense to drawing down on money as and when they need it, as opposed to sitting in their accounts and then they go to the shops and spend it. So this is really helping them match that for them. But yes, it's an overall solution that companies need to think of, and some cost the company, some don't. But as I've said, we know when we've put it into companies and we've said it to them, look, we'll put it in. If you don't like it, it'll cost you nothing, and within 3 months, we're happy to take it out for free. Whatever we know it'll be used, and it does. It's anywhere between 30 and 50% plus, depending on sectors. Staff do use it anywhere between 1 and 4 times in the month.
Yeah, it really goes back to even staff know they can ask for an advance, and maybe businesses never say no. It's still the fact that they've had to go through a process that, as you say, puts them in control. And some people do, again, that the people on this call here, financial literacy is probably a given. But, you know, even in corporate world, when you're talking to different departments and you're explaining numbers, you know, if they're not getting it at the corporate level, you can only imagine potentially what their life is like outside of work in dealing with their own finances. So yeah, sometimes we are, I would say, in a privileged position that we do understand numbers, because numbers drive everything these days. You know, very, very little is for free. Nothing's for free, as they say. So certainly, you know, being able to offer that is good. I believe a financially educated economy is good for everybody. So any ways that we can assist with that are the better. So yeah, I've sort of already asked this sort of question in a broader sense, Stephen, but is there, what are some of the wider benefits you've seen from organisations who have implemented the earned wage access?
Yeah, so there are a few. So if we look at those that are, let's say, shift worker kind of employers or need to fill, a big problem now is obviously filling shifts, you know, and there's plenty, you know, shifts that just don't get filled, or people call in the morning, I can't come in, I'm sick, or whatever the problem is, and that's fine. But what we've seen in a few of our clients now is when a shift becomes available, people are putting up their hands far quicker to do an extra shift here and there. And we're seeing it anywhere between 20 and 25% more hours they're putting in. And when we've tried to ask, we've obviously got to be very careful about how we ask people and why they're taking it up. But the ones that we have asked, it's essentially coming down to the fact that, look, we know we've got this expense coming up next week, or I know my kids, one was actually, I know my kid's going into hospital next week, I'm going to be out of pocket for that medical expense for 5,000. I want to put in more shifts now so that I can access it after my shift. I don't want to wait another 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks for my money. So for companies, they're filling shifts a lot faster and better for the company, and obviously for the employee in terms of productivity, they're much happier in terms of that. And then what we're also seeing is where people were, you know, moving jobs for $2 or $3 or $5 an hour. It kind of just becomes a no-brainer now. Why would I move for $3 or $4 or $5 an hour when I can actually just, you know, if I do need the money, I can access it when I need. And then, you know, even in the accounting world, so we're talking to a number of accounting practices, and not only the small ones, but even, you know, the top, let's call it the top 10. And the answer to there is it's become such a competitive environment that accountants are jumping from one accounting firm to the next. And it doesn't mean just because they're an accountant, they know how to budget for themselves. So again, this is another tool that they're looking at, and basically saying, okay, well, how do we, you know, put something in here to help people if and when they want it? Because the fact that just because they're earning money or they're in financial services, number one, it's not the whole company. There's also the admin staff and the support staff, but also even those that can use it for other aspects, which helps. So it's really around that, you know, just we know if people are happier, they're more productive. Simple as that.
Yeah, so is that sort of the feedback? I mean, obviously you check in with your companies on how it's gone, and McGrath would be no different. Is that what you're seeing as the feedback, that maybe there's not a, you know, hey, everybody all of a sudden is access and productivity has gone up, but they're seeing a gradual rise in, say, employee well-being, happiness, and whether they're doing pulse surveys?
We haven't had one negative feedback. Now, obviously, we haven't been in the market for you know, years and years. But from what we've had so far, we haven't taken one solution out, and we haven't had one negative feedback, which is great, you know, for companies and obviously for their staff. So,
well, I mean, you say you haven't been around long, but certainly with a product like yours, it would be very easy for somebody to be disgruntled if it didn't work as intended. So if it doesn't do what it says on the tin, then people are probably going to tell their employer that this is not the best. Why did we put this in? It's not what you promised. So certainly, as you say, maybe you've only had a short lifespan, it certainly is doing what it intends to do.
And we're the frontline customer service too, which is important. So we do tell HR and CFOs if there's any questions, if there's any problems with staff, again, in our communications, we tell them to come to us as the first port of call, so that again, there's no, we often get, oh, we don't want to have 1,000 people come to us with questions. So we deal with all of that for them, and we resolve it. So we've got our customer service team here in Sydney that deals with that, and we don't have many questions at all. It's really just the questions are really trivial. It's more around, I finished a shift, why is it not showing? And that's really just because their time and attendance hasn't updated. So Most times it's just wait another hour and you'll get it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, and not hiding behind a white label. It's obviously very clear that the solution has been provided, and there is a real business there ready to assist at any point in time. Well, guys, it's been a fantastic discussion, and it's raised awareness of many vital areas for CFOs outside of even just the financial well-being of our teams. As we close today's discussion, I'm going to give you each a final question. First one is for you, Howard. After 2 years of navigating lockdowns, closed borders, and pandemics, what do you see as the biggest challenge, and also what's the biggest opportunity facing CFOs in 2022?
Yeah, that's a good question, James. Clearly, given the onset and the rapid pace of technology, keeping pace with that side of things, the digital change and transformation is clearly one of the biggest challenges for every business and every CFO. So we're doing a lot on that front to make sure that we're providing the best tools we can for our people out there, so that it's easy doing business with us. But that's another topic, which is we can leave for another day. But just in terms of what we're talking about today, it's all about the people and what you're doing to make it a happy and safe workplace for your people. Because HR costs, I mean, it's probably the biggest cost, as you said before, of every business's P&L. And the increasing costs of HR, people are absent, or when people leave to rehire, there's just such a huge cost on the business, not only from dollars but from a time point of view. So as we said before, we're spending a lot of time on making sure that our well-being, I guess our employee benefits and well-being offer is as best as we can make it. And it's just a continual improvement of what we're trying to do, because you're never going to be at the top of your game, but if we're investing the right time and money in that, hopefully the people will want to join us and stay with us, because the cost of people leaving and attracting and retaining is just that huge. And given the new world out there, people are managing culture in the hybrid workplace is probably one of the other biggest things that we've got to try and do. It's not like everyone comes to the office every day like they used to in the old days. So just keeping that culture going when everyone's, anyone, you can work from everywhere or anywhere. So that's a key part of every business going forward, because if you don't get that right, you're going to have a problem with your people. Oh, the light just went out there. Sorry.
Yeah, it did go out. Maybe need to move around and set off the sensor. Good economically, environmental, potentially office there. McGrath. No,
I'm just going to see if I can switch it back on, but I'll join in 1 second.
No, I would certainly agree. I mean, we had Datacom on probably 12 months ago talking about payroll and this hybrid work of staff no longer having the opportunity within the halls to impress. Certainly for organizations, we try to do it at XREF, and I know others are the same, where you're trying to replicate that ability for junior staff to move up and be recognized in the business. And certainly we could again talk for hours on the different ways that people are doing it. So thanks, Howard. I think you're right. There's a big challenge there, but certainly the opportunity can impact on the bottom line in a positive way if we, I can't say we're not always going to get it right as employers, but certainly we can make a positive impact on not only staff but also our bottom line by doing things a little bit differently. Final question then for you, Stephen. For the CFOs tuned in today, what conversation should they be having with their leadership teams or their boards around the concept of earned wage access, and what are the next steps for any of those that are wanting more information?
Yeah, so I think Howard pretty much said it all, in that CFOs are and rightfully so, all focused on your bottom line. So it's really about, bottom line is not just selling a product for a margin of X, but when you've got motivated, happy staff, it all goes down to the bottom line essentially. So all we really ask is for CFOs to mention this, discuss it around the board table, understand that there really, in our mind, is no risk on the business whatsoever. If a company doesn't like it, we'll remove it. It doesn't cost them anything to put it in. And we have enough points to show companies that this does help staff. It does get them into a bit happier position. It does get them more motivated. And it does make companies stand out from their peers. We're seeing it. And when we're seeing companies that do say that they'll offer, access to your pay whenever you want it, as opposed to waiting for payday, are filling jobs quicker than their competitors. So love to, for anybody that wants to reach out to me, happy to have a coffee, another Zoom call, whatever works, and just, thrash out the pros and cons and why they would or wouldn't have it. And essentially, just allow us kind of a bit of time to show the benefits to both company and employers, because there really is both positives to both sides of the coin.
Yeah, I would agree, and certainly, as you said, the CFO's priority is the bottom line, but it doesn't mean that they take a negative stance on costs and I think it's okay for us to focus on the bottom. That's what we're employed to do, but certainly there are ways at the same time to be working with team members to improve their financial well-being and mental health generally, without it actually being a dollar cost on the business. So I'm certainly sure you'll probably get a few emails, sfurman@paytime.com.au, and we will share that, of course, with the video recording when it goes out later today. But people can ask you all the hard questions in private and dig deep. All right, well, that is an excellent place to end today's discussion. Howard and Stephen, it has been wonderful to dive deep onto this, and we appreciate you taking the time to share your thoughts and experiences with us all today. So thank you to both of you.
Yeah, thanks, James, and thanks, Howard.
Thanks for having me.
Special thanks to the team at Paytime for their support with today's webcast, and thanks to everyone who has joined in today, well over 150 odd from around Australia and New Zealand. So certainly this was a topic that people wanted to hear about. A full copy of the recording, as I said, will be made available to you later this afternoon, and it'll be emailed to you. But until next time, I am James Solomons, and I look forward to seeing you at the next CFO Magazine Lunchtime Live. Enjoy the rest of your day.